Issues that you deal with in coming up to your championship title. You want to talk to me a little bit about that?
You know, I'd always been, even coming out of high school, I went straight into the University of British Columbia, began to study human nutrition and biochemistry. And you know, the real impetus for that in itself was my penchant and focus on advancing and improving in bodybuilding and athletics. And the only way to do that really is to understand, you know, kinesiology, physiology, and human nutrition and how we can advance to performance nutrition. So I began studying that by the time I was in grade 11, 12 in high school, just for my own personal needs. And when I went into university, I became my own guinea pig. And I went straight into the sciences, which is, you know, a commitment, a full time. And, you know, at that time I was also competing sporadically and climbing the ladder from Mr. Vancouver, Mr. British Columbia, Mr. Western Canada, nationals, all the way up. And, you know, I used my studies to kind of navigate my knowledge base, but then began to dabble in how to use various nutraceuticals in different ways, especially, specifically anti-inflammatory agents. And the reason was that I had this recurring gastrointestinal problem, and it would always kind of rise up sometime around exam time at university. And so I thought, you know, I just have this general predisposition that's incapable of dealing with high stress. And so I had difficulty even writing a lot of my exams because I had this gastrointestinal problem. I'd have to get up, go to the washroom. What the heck's going on here? And throughout the year, yes, I had this problem, but it was nowhere near as disruptive. But eventually I began to cope with it by finding various anti-inflammatory agents that took the edge off it and didn't completely resolve it. But the anti-inflammatory strategy, which later in life became the subject matter of my postdoc and my doctoral and thesis work, that inflammatory activity was also designed by me in my head to improve recovery from the training. You know, if you're working out regularly each day, like the average person, I mean, you know, recovery is quite easy when you're young. But, you know, I was training intensely, and, you know, anybody could tell you that remembers those days, there was very few people that trained with the intensity physically and mentally the way I did. I mean, I would go into the gym and I would meditate before my training session, meditate after my training session, and in between, I don't know where Franco was, but he didn't exist. It was a completely different personality and state. And, you know, you go in with that sort of intensity and that commitment, you've got to provide as much recovery tools for your body as possible. Protein, carbohydrates, and they're strategizing everything properly. But I didn't realize that curcumin-based technology that I was using as an anti-inflammatory, believe it or not, all the way back into 1988, where curcumin wasn't even known in North America. And eventually there was a world shortage, and we ran out, and I realized, and this is while I was preparing for Mr. North America, the IFBB Mr. North America in 1991, I ran out and I said, okay, you know what, I'm going to have to just, you know, hunker down and deal without using the anti-inflammatory. And I wasn't recovering as quickly, but that gastrointestinal problem just flared up and went out of control because I wasn't using the countermeasure that kept it in control. And I didn't realize even what had happened. I was hospitalized before the North American Championships. I lost 25 pounds in a matter of just over 2 weeks in the hospital until they diagnosed me. And they said, hey, you have severe ulcerative colitis. And I was bleeding. I was in really rough shape. And they said, you know, we have to do surgery as quickly as possible or you're going to die. And the life that you know today is gone. It's done. So I said, wait a minute, you know, like, you guys hold off. I kind of, you know, being in the hospital for 2 weeks, contemplating this situation, you begin looking very intensely at your day-to-day and, you know, what could be contributing to the shifts that took place. You know, most people just say, well, you know what, disease just developed. Disease doesn't just develop like that, especially with that intensity, unless it's an infection that happens suddenly, unless it's, you know, a mutation that finally comes to fruition and delivers the physiological or or the outcome that that mutation delivers to the body. Nevertheless, I realized, and I guess, and was very hopeful, that the curcumin technology I was using, because I wasn't using your 1 or 2 pill dose. I was using between 6 and 7 grams a day, which is unprecedented. People don't do that, but I was an extremist. And I went back to using that, and I slowly recovered. Sure enough, though, I did use prednisone, because the doctors have prescribed prednisone to alleviate the inflammation immediately. However, it's not something you can use long term because it causes secondary challenges. So they warned me about that, and I said, look, let me just go down the path of what I was doing. I'm going to see if I can get back to at least limping along the way I was before, and avoiding the surgery. And I did. And within 6 months, I was back to training with the same intensity I was running. And then I won Mr. North America the year later. But having done that, I look at the situation and say, look, if I keep doing this at the intensity with which it requires, something's going to break. And I already have, this gastrointestinal problem that I'm limping along with. And in fact, it really compromised my capacity to be the best I could be at bodybuilding. But I still won unanimously at the IFBB Weider North American Championships. And so I realized, look, I'm going to take the win, and I'm going to continue my research and formalize it. So after winning that, it was about 8 months after I had graduated with my undergrad in human nutrition. So I kind of took the platform and began a marketing campaign. Mr. North America, here's my programs that I had developed while running through the education in my undergrad. And they worked for me. They worked for a lot of people that were in the gym that I was helping. So I realized, there was some functionality there, but they were supplements. And it was just a strategic and very educated way to point those supplements to an outcome that we were looking for. So I developed a product line, and the objective with the product line was ultimately to create enough revenue to do the research that I wanted to do on this substance that people said was, quote unquote, an anti-inflammatory. Because I realized at the time, when I was looking at the certificates of analysis of the compounds that I was using, there were certain features of those certificates that related to the product that worked better for me. So I said, okay, there's got to be something here, and I'm going to look now to isolate the compound that I saw stood out in the certificates of analysis. And I did that over 7 years, financed by the company that I put to market called Champion's Choice. And then began a journey of doing formal research. And, it was a testament to perseverance, strategic study, and then avoiding the surgery. Still today, I'm 57, I haven't had that surgery. I have things under control. I've had to modify the treatment protocols over the last 10 years because I'm 57. The disease also, itself evolves, but modifying based on knowledge. And so the research that I've done over the last 20 years has now, instead of being formulation strategies, actually going in and looking at the pharmacology to the genome and the proteome of each of these constituents to know precisely how each of them contribute to what they call a polypharmacology in these natural compounds, and then to know which constituents we can focus in on and standardize to create an effectiveness that's as selective and as potent as we see in some pharmaceutical agents, but without the unknowns that we have in many pharmaceutical agents that are foreign chemicals to the body. Now, I don't want to go into the philosophies and the positioning of pharmaceutical versus nutraceutical, because there's an unfortunate, polarized situation in society today between the two. But the reality is, pharmaceuticals have played a tremendous role in the evolution of humanity and the safeguarding of our populations is with things as simple and things as we take for granted, like antibiotics. I mean, we've taken antibiotics for granted, but the fact is, none of us could ever have surgery or recover from a simple infection without the basic antibiotic. So, there's a place for pharmaceuticals, but where there's a big factor and a big miss is that mainstream is not seeing the place for nutraceuticals and natural compounds for recovery. And, what I've endeavored to do is to bridge that gap.
So when the doctors are saying, hey, you're going to die if you don't get this surgery, and then you say, well, I'm not getting it, how does that conversation look?
Well, I had to get a different doctor because he said, look, I can't treat you anymore because, if you're not going to follow my direction, and I respectfully understand that. How can you treat someone who's not following your direction? And that becomes a liability for the doctor. So it's just a matter of the way you have to chalk it up and say, look, I trust. I'm thankful for them having discovered that this is an irrefutable disease. It was severe ulcerative colitis, not even regular ulcerative colitis, and I was bleeding, and it was very, serious. And I didn't want to claim that, I had enough knowledge to be able to make those decisions on my own. And as I said to them, and I say to people today, I just need to gather more information before making a decision like that. Because I've done a lot of research, but have done it without, and I had an undergrad, without the qualifications that someone that does true pharmaceutical or allopathic drug research, without those qualifications. So, the mature thing to do is to gather those people who have those qualifications and have them interpret the data, and then I can make decisions based on that, and that's what I did. But later on, I realized, I'm not getting a commitment from people with those credentials to do what I want to do, because if they don't believe that it's of value, how are you going to get someone like that to spend 2 years researching an outcome without believing that there's a possibility? And there's two ways to look at that. One is, if you believe too much, you could create a conflict of interest because subconsciously you're going to drive towards an outcome. But, if you pull away from the emotional impact of what you're trying to accomplish, and you're looking at the data month by month and navigating the research based on that, the data then brings it back to a conscious navigation of what you're trying to accomplish. And that's what I did, and that's what I do.
What would you tell people who are trying to get into bodybuilding, and what do you think you can say to the younger generation to motivate them to have that consistency that you were able to develop throughout your life?
Well, I think, I'll tell you how I did it myself and what helped me, but I don't know if it's really healthy for everybody, because each individual is motivated in different ways. And I got to tell you, I see, my son being motivated very much the same way I was. And, if I had people say, there's no way you can do that, it's impossible, it's not statistically possible because of this, because of that, and I'd be like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm going to prove you wrong. But at the same time, if you have that attitude, I'm going to prove you wrong, you're really running your life for other people and what they say, and that's not right either. But, if I decide to say, and I did, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to be Mr. Olympia, but at the same time, I am going to get an education that's going to facilitate that process. And so in order to justify putting a commitment into an academic program at the level of, PhD experimental medicine and biological pharmacology, like, in order to actually justify that and have the motivation to run it, I had to pull that into my objective. And that is, I need the academic knowledge in order to excel and be the bodybuilder I want to be. And I would convince myself at an early age, and I tell my son this all the time, I tell people this all the time, sometimes it's not good to articulate this amongst your peers because it sounds like you're egotistical and a little bit, unrealistic. But you have to somehow convince yourself, I'm already Mr. Olympia. And, this is me at grade 12. That's what I am. Now, I have to strategically and logistically take the steps to get my trophy. And that might take 7 or 8 years, 10 years. But, few people are capable of thinking that far ahead. And in the meantime, if it's going to take me 8 years, now I have to reverse engineer those 8 years so that I have realistic goals over the next 6 months, 1 year, 18 months, 2 years, realistic goals that fit into a lifestyle and a life plan that at least is functional in the interim. And that's not easy to do. But if you make your business and your research all coupled and bundled into the same outcome, my business was a sports nutrition business for athletes and bodybuilders that wanted to perform. So it kind of forced me to stay on track with the bodybuilding because I had to show people it worked.
Is it almost a delusional confidence?
Yes, but here's the thing. Your mind manifests everything. You just have to make your mind believe it. Christina's saying something. yeah, she's saying despite what other people around you are saying.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. You know, the reality is, okay, when I entered my first bodybuilding contest, you got to think of the context of this. I was in grade 12, okay? And I was working out. I wasn't really massive, but I was in great shape. I still felt I could do well. But you can imagine, and I know this for a fact, 50% of the people who call themselves your friends are there supporting you going, holy crap, let's go, man. This is awesome. That's amazing. 50% of the other people, they want to see you fail, not because they're nefarious or they're bad people, but they're at an age and stage in their life where if you're able to do that and execute on a monumental endeavor, which is physically monumental, but also emotionally and mentally monumental to overcome any of the insecurities that you're exposing yourself to. You know, you got to imagine, I'm going to go up and say, yeah, I'm going to compete in this provincial show at grade 12, which nobody does. And I'm going to have a bikini just basically bearing everything. And I'm going to go on stage. And if I come last out of 72 people, people are going to laugh. And you got to realize you don't know how you're going to fare until you do step on stage, because you don't know who your competition is. When you got, 100 people on stage, they're coming from everywhere. You have no clue who and how they are. So you don't know how you're going to fare. And that's how you have to, I feel like that set the stage for me as a young man, not to worry about what other people are doing, looking like, or going to do. Focus on your goal. And eventually, people will follow and step in because you're doing your thing so well and you're not worried about what other people are doing. Just do your thing and do it well.
What was the feeling when you got the announcement that you won? What did that mean to you as someone who has probably been told no 100 times? What did that mean for you and your confidence as a person? Do you think that it impacted you as a person today?
It definitely shapes you, because you have to realize this isn't, and anybody who's gone through anything like this, whether it's bodybuilding or any other Olympic sport or things like that, it's not something you work towards over a week. It's something you work towards over years. And you sacrifice a lot. So it really shapes you to justify your personal potential to achieve, despite the naysayers, because there's a lot of them, and you just keep going. And it's like, you think about today, I'm in the medical field breaking ground in areas that are novel, and I'm experiencing the same thing, and I don't care. The same thing as in, you shouldn't be doing that because it's not selective enough, like an allopathic medicine. And I'm like, wait a minute. I just had that allopathic medicine as a positive control in the research, and it's this performed better. But people do not engage in what I'm doing for fear of being attacked. And I'm saying, if I'm being attacked, then I'm stepping on toes. If nobody's attacking me, if you don't want anybody to attack you, go sit in the closet and don't participate in life. And in fact, go get a job and just, follow the leader. And you'll probably not get attacked. You want to go down a path that makes a difference, you're going to get attacked. So you just expect it, but stay on track.
What's your best way of handling being attacked? Is it just you think it's all mindset? Stay in your own lane, don't pay attention to them?
Well, there's different levels of attack. we've had legal attacks, and then you've got to deal with that. And that's like a six.
Let's say someone leaving like a nasty comment on social media or something.
It doesn't mean anything to me. I mean, if you want to analyze those things, you can go back and analyze where this person's from or whatever. I mean, it doesn't reflect on me. It's like, oh, okay, I'm doing this. I'm still pointed. It just bounces off. Well, what did you say? Sorry, who are you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm too busy looking at what I'm trying to achieve. If there's any value in what they're saying to help navigate what I'm going to achieve, that's fine. And in fact, I always say this because, and I say this intentionally because of my early adulthood, and like all of us, when we're in our 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, we're trying to achieve in order to prove that we can achieve. And that's almost, working to show people around you that you are a doer and you can get things done. But you get to a certain level of maturity and appreciation for you as an individual that you do it now, or I do it now, to advance my knowledge and my capacity to achieve my goal, not to show other people I can do it. And that's when it becomes meaningful. And I think, people, especially young entrepreneurs or young people striving, have to break that barrier as early as possible in life, not to worry about what other people are thinking, but to gather the information that people may offer when they're thinking about the things you're doing, to help navigate what you're doing, but not allow it to derail what you're doing, because you stay on track. And because it's about what you want to do to advance yourself. For me today, I compete against myself. I'm not looking at what's out there. I look at what's out there to see what trends are happening. I don't care if somebody doesn't like what I'm doing. I may ask, why? Why don't you like what I'm doing? Can you give me some rationale that I can use to improve what I'm doing? No? Okay, get out of the way.
What future aspirations for your company do you have, and how do you envision it contributing to the future of healthcare?
Well, as obesity and metabolic syndrome and diabetes have become prevalent in society, and we know, especially North America, it's primarily North America, we know for the major part, these are lifestyle-related diseases. There's no doubt there are people who are faced with genetic anomalies that create degrees of metabolic change, and usually it's related to insulin mutations. And there are different types of mutations that result in variable efficiencies of the insulin peptide in people, and it may in fact be the feature that creates this what they call, my metabolism is not as fast as yours, quote unquote. And there's so many different things that can contribute to that, whether it's thyroid insufficiency, insulin insufficiency, things like that. Nevertheless, lifestyle does exacerbate and compound on those issues. So we can change various parameters of our lifestyle, various things we do, diets, critical exercise, to combat those changes. But then what I've endeavored to do, and this is what we're trying to accomplish, and we're doing it very well, is to look at which genes and which proteins as part of the proteome in the cell are responsible and engaged in that pathology of those diseases or those syndromes, like metabolic syndrome and things like that. And then to see how those same proteins and genes are changed by the diet to help correct the body. And sometimes it's not necessarily the proteome or the genes, it's actually the metabolic pathways that are downstream of that. But then to determine how can we use prompts, metabolic prompts. This is real biohacking. I mean, biohacking, that term is just loosely used by everybody. But we're looking then for metabolic prompts that target the genome and the proteome in the same places that these lifestyle shifts can induce. Why? Because it gives people then the opportunity to synergize with a supplement that is highly specific for that genome target or proteomic target, to make the shifts metabolically in accordance and in alignment with their lifestyle changes. And it makes it easier so that their lifestyle changes are not fighting a battle against a tide that their metabolism is stuck in. And therefore, it makes it easier for people to make those changes, and we're doing it. We're showing how we're activating, this is mind-blowing, sirtuin proteins that are involved in correcting genomic composition and structure and activity in the sense of acetylation. You can't change how your genes are actually, you can't change your genetic profile, but we can change how those genes are functioning and reset them and default them back to how they function when you were young, in accordance with metabolic activity when you were young. Now, this is profound. So we've kind of loosely called one of these compounds that we finally did a pilot trial for and put in a pill. We call it the cold plunge and the fasting in a pill, because it actually triggers the same proteins in your cell, sirtuin proteins, mTOR, and other proteins, uncoupling protein, the same ones that are activated when you do a cold plunge to induce recovery. And so can you imagine, we're saying, wait a minute, we may not be able to replace all of the activities that are positive when it comes to cold plunge and fasting, but we do know that the key proteins that are shifted or changed or modulated by these activities, we can also modulate with these compounds that are natural, yet we've isolated them and made them more pointed for those genomic and proteomic targets. So we can synergize the effects that you're going to get with fasting. We're going to synergize the effects you get with cold plunge, and you can get many of those effects even without doing those things, and the weight just flies off. And your body temperature goes up because now we've activated thermogenesis. And there's so many things that we can shift naturally. And when I say shift, it's basically restoring what worked for you when you were younger. That's what we're doing now. And people are saying, well, wait a minute, you can't do that. Well, yeah, you can. Actually, people are claiming out there they're all biohackers and they're using these supplements that work okay. But we're going into the genome and pointing those so that they work extremely potently. And they help you get to your goals, whatever your goals are, because they improve cognition. Your brain lights up. Your body starts becoming a fat-burning machine. It actually becomes focused on lipid metabolism as opposed to primarily using glucose. And so, yeah, those are the kind of things we're doing. We're doing research that we think has traction to change people's lives. And those things don't happen. It's the same commitment I had when I was in bodybuilding and competing. These are all 2, 3, and 4 year outcomes. When you start your research, you have to reverse engineer your outcome over the next 2.5 years to determine how am I going to navigate to those targets. And it doesn't happen in 1 week. These are outcomes that take place over 1.5 to 2 years worth of research.
Does natural always mean the healthier alternative?
No, that's not at all true. I mean, there are a lot of toxic natural substances, so we have to be careful. I mean, if we start pointing substances with greater potency and pharmacological activity at the genome and proteome, I mean, you've got to expect then, there's potential side effects that may escalate as well. These are natural compounds, but they're pointed with extremely high potency. So, we stay, however, within the parameters of regulatory agencies so that the safety research that's done on these compounds still stays intact in the context of what we're achieving. Now, there's some products that we've generated. In fact, we were approved by Health Canada, the government, to do a clinical trial on respiratory disease, and in fact even COVID, when COVID was hot, because we showed in our research that we published that we were able to inhibit cytokine storm in various aspects of the immune system that became dysregulated upon being infected by various viruses. So what happened was we expanded our experience and our target to multiple respiratory diseases. Now, what Health Canada said was, hey, your compound is formidable. We're giving you anti-inflammatory claim, but if you raise the concentration to this level, above 50%, now it's a drug. We say, okay, then we'll apply for drug status for that version. This other version goes in over the counter because we have enough safety data for that. And that's how it works. So we'll study both ends of the spectrum, and then Health Canada will tell us, or FDA will tell us, hey, wait a minute, that one there falls into drug status because the effects you're showing are considerably classified as drug activity. And then, but this version that has lower concentration is still over the counter. We can use the safety data that you're offering, and we go that way. So we have both ends of those running at the same time.
There's that pill that's going around. A lot of like big influencers are taking as a way to shred weight.
Yeah, semaglutide, Ozempic has, Ozempic is one of the drug brand names. Yeah, I mean, these compounds originally were designed as anti-diabetic agents to support insulin function, actually to propagate insulin secretion to help manage blood sugar. And there's other features of the mechanism by which it works. The root compound is called GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide. And this compound is secreted to help reduce appetite in response to nutrients and do various things in the body that help to facilitate digestion and appetite control, things like that, and then blood sugar balance. But, you know, I think there's a place for those drugs for people who may have some serious conditions that contribute to obesity, even insulin mutations, even thyroid problems may be affected positively by the use of this compound. Nevertheless, you know, when you're using pharmaceutical analogs, because the GLP-1, semaglutide is the name of the drug, is a synthetic GLP-1. It's not the same GLP-1 your body secretes. They've changed out some of the amino acids. And now we're showing, and in fact, we actually recently investigated it, and we've seen irrefutably that it inhibits a protein called mTOR. And the reason why we went down this path is because we were hearing that a lot of people have been losing a lot of lean body mass, muscle mass, when using the product. So you can lose a lot of weight, but you're also losing lean body mass. And that's not a good thing, because if you lose a lot of lean body mass, you're also losing the tissue that's metabolically active, that burns calories. And therefore, it just becomes more difficult if you stop using this product to maintain your weight or lose more.
If I'm just someone in my 20s, I'm trying to lose weight. I'm hearing all my friends and everyone else taking Ozempic. Should I take it? If I don't have any disease, I'm just looking to lose 15 pounds to look good for summer.
Well, look, a medical practitioner is the one that's going to really be able to evaluate you based on your lifestyle, your metabolic condition, and all that. You know, I'm urged to say, look, you want to lose 15 pounds. I would change your lifestyle and lose 15 pounds in 2 months quite easily with a changed lifestyle that will then support and maintain the result you're looking for. If you used something like Ozempic to get you started down that path, I would try to use it for a short period of time to kind of get the momentum going. But the challenge is, if it is inhibiting mTOR and breaking down skeletal muscle as a function of that, when you finish your cycle, it's going to be difficult to stay on track, and you're going to be on it forever. So the question is, do you want to be on a synthetic drug for the rest of your life to lose 15 pounds and keep it off because you're not interested in changing your lifestyle? Now, for someone who weighs 400 pounds and has allowed the lifestyle and or whatever other condition they have to continue down that path for too long, it's pretty hard to make that turn. And so, you know, Ozempic may be part of the solution for them. But, you know, for most of us, to lose 15, 20 pounds, that's a lifestyle change for the majority of us. And, you know, shame on us for not committing to a lifestyle change, but looking for the pill, so to speak, to lose weight. Now, you know, again, if the individual is prepared to change the lifestyle and go on Ozempic at the same time for a short period of time to facilitate the new state, yes, I'd say, yeah, go ahead. But if you're not prepared to do that, I'd say, don't bother.
I can understand where they're coming from, but I'm just wondering if there's like back-end like health issues that they might not understand.
But I can tell you, guys, because Ozempic now comes also in a pill form, excuse me, and the injectable. I can tell you one thing from knowing the mechanism of its activity. If you use Ozempic and you rely on it exclusively, but maintain a lifestyle that involves overindulgence and you just eat, and I can eat all this stuff because I'm taking Ozempic, no problem. Well, the GLP-1 peptide also reduces digestion and flow of food. It what's called increases emptying time, meaning the food stays in your stomach for a longer period of time. And if you become indulgent in that physiological condition because of that drug, there's no doubt in my mind we're going to have gastrointestinal blockages. That's going to be a big problem for people who don't want to change their lifestyle and then rely on the drug as the crutch. It's like this. I use this analogy often. It's like, it does a marathon runner, because they want to run and they have that penchant to run. He breaks his leg, he's in a cast and a crutch, but dang it, he's going to continue to run marathons. He doesn't. Mm-hmm. He's got a broken leg. He can't run those marathons, even with the crutch, even if he's going to take opiates and painkillers, because he has to run. No, if you're obese, if you're insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic, you're going to take the Ozempic drug to help you, great. But don't continue to run the marathon. Don't keep eating and doing the things you do that caused the disease originally, because things are going to break down further.
Could you share your most memorable wins in your journey?
Okay, so I'd have to say that the development, the atypical development of this curcuminoid technology that we patented to help treat and support a symptom-free state from colitis, Crohn's, and other gastrointestinal disorders, in my opinion, is probably one of the biggest wins that we still haven't fully developed yet. And that is because it did many things. One, helped me realize what the potential is of the research we're doing, and then to expand it to other areas and other compounds. And two, it gave me validation for what I was trying to accomplish and the confidence to say, I don't care what you're saying, this stuff does work. We're going to find, it does work. We're going to find the mechanism by which it works, so that then we can start working on improving it. And that was the driving force for continuing the pharmacological work, doing my doctorate, and continuing the work with other compounds to further optimize them. Because you got to realize, and I say this all the time, and I think some people who are on the edge and not really convinced kind of go, oh, okay, I get it now. And that is like, I've been working a lot on traditional Indian medicines, Ayurvedic medicines, because, and there's some Chinese traditional medicines that have similar activities, but there's 3,000 years or more of track record with some of these compounds. And, I literally went to India in an academic environment because we were delivering, we were conveying a lot of the information that we had discovered on the anti-inflammatory side, and we're doing work now on cancer internationally that's groundbreaking. We have 2 papers that are just being published now in that arena. So people say, these are holistic compounds. They have a whole bunch of phytonutrients in them that we don't know a lot about, but you need to leave them intact, because if you take them apart, it changes its holistic effect on the body, right? Then there's the other side of this story, the other polarized end, and that's the allopathic medical community saying, wait a minute, you can't use these polypharmacological agents because there are too many things going on and we don't know what the heck's going on. We study selective compounds that have highly specific targets, so they target a protein with specificity and we know what it's doing. And that, is a bit of a fallacy, because you don't really know what it's doing. It's doing a whole bunch of things elsewhere too. Nevertheless, let's pretend that those things are true on both ends. And when I went to India and did project a lot of, I was India and in Indonesia, Singapore, and delivering our research and information that we've discovered. No, you cannot break down that compound. You cannot break down this polypharmaceutical homeopathic agent, this holistic compound. And I say, why? Let me ask you this. The compound, the herbal agent that was used 3,000 years ago by healers it's impossible that it's the same compound we have today. It's going to have a lot of the same actives in it, but The climate was different then. The insects were different then. The soil conditions were different then. The way they harvested were different then. So the Constitution was different 3,000 years ago. You can't tell me what we're producing 3,000 years later today in an agricultural setting is going to have the same constitution of the compound of the thing you extracted from 3,000 years ago. It cannot. So the only way to justify and validate natural medicines today and in the future is to use the science we know, the allopathic medical drug research models that we are applying to them. Separate each, isolate each constituent, map it to the genome and the proteome, know exactly what each does, put them back together with specificity for what you're trying to accomplish. Rather than, okay, just throw it in and see what it does. That doesn't work. By doing what I just explained, isolating them, mapping the pharmacology to the genome and the proteome associated with the disease pathology, then we start to think and look like allopathic medical practitioners, being highly selective for a disease pathology and a protein that might be mutated, affected in an adverse way, that's causing the disease symptoms and the cell behavior that is unwanted. And therefore we can correct that. But if you take the herb that you expected is the same as the herb that you had 3,000 years ago that was reported then, it cannot be the same. What we need to do today is isolate them, the constituents, map the pharmacology, re-engineer them for how we want to affect the disease condition today and improve health. We need to do that with the science we have today because we didn't have that science 3,000 years ago. And that's the only way to go. So I'm kind of in this, I always say, and I've seen this in articles written about me, I'm on this island where I've hybridized our approach using allopathic medical tools and knowledge and old school understanding of what a herb should do, and then validating it or not. And sometimes we don't validate it. We say, okay, you know what, next, we need to go to the next one. And that's the way we move ahead with knowledge that's accurate and precise in terms of the pharmacology of natural medicines.
What advice would you give to young aspiring scientists and researchers looking to make a difference in the fields?
Well, I just said this 2 days ago, because we've brought on 2 more researchers in the lab. And, you know, one is a tenured, like he's been around a long time. He was a director or at least a lab manager at the UBC Heart and Lung Research Lab. And so, you know, I said, look, you know, all of us here have a lot of knowledge that we've acquired cognitively, that we've accrued through education. But the biggest challenge we face, and it's a big challenge that is systemic in the academic environment, is that these brilliant minds are put to work, are hired and put to work in an academic institution, yet they're given a box to work in. And these are your parameters. Do not go outside that because we have rules. And yes, everybody has rules. And like I said to my people, it was yesterday, I said, I want you to gather and accrue the knowledge you've had and take it outside the box. Forget what you've been told is a rule, is a barrier, is a limitation. Forget it. And I gave them an example because I said, and I'm not going to give you the details because it's all in NDA, and we're trying to keep it secret because we're just trying to develop a drug and also then a natural version of it. I said, I want you to isolate this peptide for me, then I want you to determine what the transactivation site on that protein is, and then we're going to actually change the amino acid sequence of that so that it doesn't create that adverse event. And they're like, well, you can't do that. Yeah, you can actually. we can. And yeah, I guess you can, but you don't typically do that. That's right. We're not typical. Let's go do that. And I think people have to think outside the box. And the question is, you know, are we going to be able to use that newly developed technology to treat disease? Maybe, maybe not. You don't know until you do it and you study it. And then you know what it does. But if someone tells you, we can't do this because it's not, and I was told this all my life. And in fact, when I did my doctoral work at UBC, you can't do that because, you know, you work within a pharmaceutical environment. Wait a minute. You know, Health Canada approved this technology. It's in the marketplace and was in the marketplace 10 years before I even came here to do my doctorate. And I was selling it. And the reason why I'm doing my doctor is because this is making a living for me. No, you can't sell it anymore because now you're in the experimental medicine program in the Faculty of Medicine and we have different rules. Okay, I get it. You have different rules, but Health Canada approved it. You can't override that. So that will stay where it is, and I will do this over here within the rules. And the thing is, the rules, I hate to say this, rules are not meant to be broken. But if we are going to advance as human beings or advance as a human species, we have to determine where the edge really is. You do not know where the edge is until you've crossed it and had consequences as a function of crossing it. And then you back off and go again and see how you can do it. You have to know where the edge is. People cannot tell you where the edge is. You need to know where the edge is.